Hey! Where did you go, squirrel?
Hey, welcome back to ScreenCrush. I'm Ryan Airy, and I'm here to talk about the best character in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. Now, the movie was exceptional, the best MCU trilogy, and maybe the best Part 3 of any trilogy ever. I laughed, I cried, and I am excited for the future. But I think we may look back at this movie and remember it as the MCU movie that introduced Adam Warlock into the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
The himbo secondary villain?
But Doug Warlock is so much more than that. He has the potential to become the character of the cosmic side of the MCU, and we have thought of a way that his movie would be instrumental in how it ties into Kang, the Kang Dynasty, and Secret Wars. Seriously, we are so excited about how this can play out, and I can't wait to explain it to you. So I'm going to run through some of Adam's history in the comics. Now, we touched on this in our breakdown video, but we're going to have to go into way more detail here because this is going to be key in understanding what is next going forward for the movies. Then I'm going to talk about Warlock's potential solo movie and how it can tie into the Star-Lord solo movie that we talked about in this video, where Star-Lord teams up with the Eternals to face off against the Celestials. Cosmic stories are my favorite stories from the Marvel Comics, and I am very, very excited to see how all this plays out. And by the way, everybody, I want to show off this extremely cool Doug as Rocket tee, which is available in our merch store, and you can find the link for that below. We have tons of other fun tees and gear that I think you'll like, and shopping our merch store is a great way that you can directly support our channel. Now, back to what I was saying. So, what we saw in Guardians 3, that's like 1% of Warlock's story in the comics. The movie was actually pretty loyal to his early appearances. He is created by a group called the Enclave, who want to create a genetically perfect person, and unlike the High Evolutionary, they succeeded. But Adam came out of the cocoon kind of young and dumb. In his very second appearance, for example, he sees Lady Sif and says, yeah, I want to mate with her, and then Thor has to fight him to win Lady Sif back. Warlock also does this thing where if he dies or is near death, he creates a cocoon around himself. When the cocoon hatches, his memory is sometimes shaky, and he may have new powers. I guess he's a little bit like Doctor Who.
Legs! I've still got legs! Good.
So in the comics, his cocoon was found by the High Evolutionary, who was just then building Counter-Earth. So in the comics, the High Evolutionary was trying to make Ani-Men for Counter-Earth, just like he does in the movie. And just like in the movie, these animals were way too violent. One of them was a mutated wolf who called himself the Man-Beast. So when the High Evolutionary actually finished Counter-Earth and was about to fill it with peaceful, perfect humans, the Man-Beast corrupted these humans so they would do evil things. This is also kind of what happens to Counter-Earth in the movie. So this makes Man-Beast kind of like the devil of this world.
And I'm the devil. Now kindly undo these straps.
So then writer Roy Thomas made Adam Warlock into the savior of Counter-Earth, more like the Messiah. He got a ragtag group of teens to follow him around and then introduced a Counter-Earth version of Doctor Doom and Reed Richards. Honestly, I think Thomas just liked having his own Earth to play with, where he could use like whatever characters he wanted and do new things with them.
You cannot control everything.
But I can.
So Man-Beast becomes president of the United States, then sentences Warlock to death. Promise I'm not making any of this up. Adam is then crucified publicly, then is resurrected. He defeats the Man-Beast and ascends into outer space.
Yeah, that's a pretty New Testament.
Yes, it is. So I doubt if we're going to see any of that in the movie, since Counter-Earth is now at Owen and Beru levels of crispy. But I'm telling you this to establish that being a religious figure is in the DNA of Adam Warlock. There's always societies who look to him as a kind of golden god. And it's also important to know that Adam always thinks of himself as a champion of life. See, Warlock is a character who is so powerful, the only person who can really defeat him is himself. And that is who's going to be the main villain of a Warlock movie.
He's gonna fight himself? This makes no sense. It's like when you tried to explain the ending in Planet of the Apes.
Dude, that ending makes perfect sense, and so does this. Let me explain. So the best thing that ever happened to Adam Warlock the character was writer-artist Jim Starlin taking over his book. This is actually Jim Starlin in Endgame.
What about you?
Starlin was Marvel's cosmic mastermind for decades. He made these incredibly twisted, imaginative stories. He and writer Steve Englehart would drop acid and walk around the city dreaming up these wild concepts. Although, that's really dangerous. Don't do that.
You want to sell me death sticks?
I don't want to sell you death sticks.
You want to go home and rethink your life?
I want to go home and rethink my life.
So Jim Starlin began his run with Adam Warlock flying through space, and he encounters these soldiers from the Universal Church of Truth. Now, this is a massive galaxy-conquering religion that is a lot like the Spanish Inquisition. They conquer worlds and force the people into their way of life, which ironically is what the church is trying to preserve. They believe in the preservation of all life.
So they kill billions of people?
I cherish peace with all my heart. I don't care how many men, women, and children I need to kill to get it.
They're an evil group, and they're ruled by this mysterious guy called the Magus, who at first appears as a giant head floating in space. Now, I should also mention that a key part of Warlock's story in the comics is the Soul Stone.
Hey, that's in the movies.
Yes, it is. Now, remember how in the movies the Soul Stone had a price.
A soul for a soul.
Oh yeah, I remember.
Well, that's because in the comics, the Soul Stone is this malevolent, vampiric force that is always tempting Adam to consume souls, pulling him closer and closer to the dark side.
Good.
Now, clearly, in the movies, the Soul Stone is no longer around.
He used the stones to destroy the stones.
But I don't think the stones can be truly ever destroyed. Thanos says,
Reduced to atoms.
and the law of conservation of energy says that energy can neither be created nor destroyed, only transferred. And the Infinity Stones are like made of the fundamental building blocks of the universe. So I've always thought that they would slowly reform over millennia. Anyways, Soul World still exists.
Soul World, that 70s funk dance show?
No, that's solid gold.
Fab Five Freddy told me everybody's fly. DJ spinning, I said my.
Soul World is the place where Gamora confronts Thanos at the end of Infinity War, and in a deleted scene where Tony met his daughter at the end of Endgame. So we can presume that even though the Soul Stone was destroyed, Soul World still exists. Now in the comics, Soul World is a kind of addictive paradise.
Or like the Nexus in Star Trek Generations.
Exactly. So Adam could still have a connection to Soul World in the movies because Soul World still exists. Maybe that gem in his head is an artificial soul gem that connects him to this plane of existence. I'm just spitballing here. I really want the Soul Stone to be part of the story. Now there's also two important supporting cast members in the comics, Gamora and Pip the Troll. So Gamora is like off the table for any Warlock movie because, you know. And Zoe Saldana seems to have no interest in returning to the MCU, but Pip the Troll was introduced in the Eternals. Pip is the perfect counterpoint to Adam Warlock. Warlock is very stuffy and stoic. Everything is very important. But Pip he's this little guy who smokes cigars and drinks beer and he likes to party. He grounds Adam in the real world. And more importantly, he gives Adam somebody to talk to. Now, it is possible that we could see Gamora replaced with another cosmic hero like Moondragon or even Mantis. But we actually have some way cooler theories of what Mantis can do that we're going to talk about in another video. So the big twist in this massive story is when Warlock finds out that the Magus is, in fact, his future self.
Wait, what?
Yes, at some point in the future, Adam Warlock becomes evil, turns blue, gets an afro, and then founds the Universal Church of Truth. Here's how that goes down. Adam is pulled into this other dimension by a cosmic god called the In-Betweener. He spends like, I don't know, thousands of years going insane, changing, being pulled between chaos and order. Then he re-emerges in his original reality, but years before his actual creation. So he founds this church whose goal is to protect life, a warped version of Adam's self-proclaimed goal to be a champion of life. So then the Magus has to set all these things into motion so his younger self will be pulled into the In-Betweener's dimension so he can turn insane and become the Magus. In other words, the Magus founds this church specifically to protect his own existence. Again, Warlock is the perfect man, but his absolute power is his greatest weakness because it can corrupt his soul and turn him evil. Now, all through this arc, Starlin writes these beautiful pages that are just filled with Adam thinking about things and where his place is in the universe and how he can possibly avoid becoming this evil entity. And then we see Warlock being tempted by the Soul Stone, then using it to steal people's souls, slowly being pulled into this life of an evil leader. But Warlock has an unlikely ally, Thanos. This is the beginning of their frenemy relationship that continues for decades. Sometimes they're arch enemies and sometimes they're forced to work together.
Yeah, but what's this got to do with anything?
Look, I know that Thanos is dead in the MCU, but trust me, this is going to matter later on. So in the comic, Thanos was very different. He worshipped death, so he's always trying to kill as many people as possible. He opposes the Magus because the Magus is a warped champion of life. So Thanos has invented this time portal which Warlock uses, and meanwhile Thanos goes toe-to-toe with the Magus, two incredibly powerful forces battling it out. So Warlock enters the crossroads of time, kind of like the Palace of He Who Remains with like all these different branching realities. And then Adam is able to find the moment that the Magus was created, the moment when he turned evil. So Adam shows up and is forced to kill his future self. So now this means that past Warlock knows that he's just going to have to wait around for a while, watching his life turn to shit just so a past version of himself can show up to murder him. So then Thanos breaks bad, decides he wants to extinguish all the stars in the sky, so Warlock has to help the Avengers defeat Thanos, and during this fight, his past self shows up and kills him. But then he's able to live in Soul World with Pip and Gamora happily ever after. Now there's one other Warlock story that I think is going to be adapted from the comics. Warlock was a key part of the Infinity Gauntlet storyline, which is obviously not going to happen in the movies because it's already happened. But he was also key key to the Annihilation books. So we went over these in our Guardians What's Next video. This was when a bug guy named Annihilus nearly destroyed every planet in the universe, and the event formed the modern iteration of the Guardians of the Galaxy. So in the aftermath, this race of sentient robots called the Phalanx began to assimilate the Kree Empire. Think the Borg, but like with no human parts.
You will be assimilated.
And the Phalanx were being led by Ultron, which, by the way, that villain should totally return at some point in the MCU.
We can talk about names, our favorite names, silly made-up names, normal names said in a silly voice. Wouldn't that be nice?
So in this story, Adam reunites with the High Evolutionary and works with Phyla-Vell. Phyla-Vell is a very important character in the comics. She's the daughter of Mar-Vell, the first Captain Marvel, and she's the little girl who's part of the new Guardians team that we see here. So Warlock has to team up with her and the High Evolutionary and eventually the Guardians of the Galaxy to stop Ultron and the Phalanx.
But what's that got to do with the movies?
Alright, so let's talk about how this can all be adapted into the movies. First of all, cross Phalanx off the list and write in Universal Church of Truth. We're going to combine these two storylines. So Guardians 3 ends with Adam finding a new family, the Guardians, like he does in the comics. But let's just say his solo movie begins with the Guardians on a mission and then something happens. He loses control of his great powers. A voice calls out to him, distracts him, and he unleashes his full abilities, killing innocents. So for the good of the team, he has to leave them behind and find out whose voice was calling to him. Really investigate this darkness within his soul that's caused him to do these evil things. Now this is a lot like Wanda at the beginning of Civil War, except here he leaves the team for their own good. And you know what? Maybe Phyla-Vell comes along because they're friends now. She could actually be the Gamora character in this story. Adam runs across the Universal Church of Truth as they're conquering planets. Now, in our Star-Lord Returns video, we talked about how the Eternals could recruit Star-Lord, a half-Celestial, to save Circe and the other Eternals. Star-Lord would also want Tiamat and the other Celestials to spare Earth because, you know, that's where he eats his cereal now.
Why would you want to save it? Because I'm one of the idiots who lives in it!
So Star Fox, the Eternals, Star-Lord, they're all out trying to save Earth from the Celestials. And you know what? Maybe they get captured by the Universal Church of Truth. Or maybe they're just not in this movie and Pip left the team to join Adam Warlock because he was bored. The point is, Adam gets captured by the Church like in the comics, and they keep forcing him into these more and more desperate situations where he has to do bad things to save people. And I want to reiterate here that Pip the Troll has to be in the Warlock movie. You need this weird little burping guy to be a counterpoint to this perfect godlike man.
Wow! Oh, my ears! My eyes are numb.
So remember, emotionally, Adam is basically a blank slate at this point. In Guardians 3, he was only following the High Evolutionary's orders to save his race. And after he shows the Ravager that he means business, Adam proclaims that he feels bad after doing this. I mean, remember, he's only like 5 weeks old. He's still learning how to feel. So he would be very susceptible to the dark side. He would be using his power for what he thinks is the greater good, all the while he's actually slowly becoming the Magus. And this is where he will get an unlikely helper. In the comics, it was Thanos, but in the movies, we have two options. One, it could be the High Evolutionary who maybe didn't die at the end of Guardians 3. But a more fun option is that he gets help from the MCU's new big bad, Kang the Conqueror.
But he's dead. We saw him die.
Doug, he's not dead. Come on. Ant-Man gets in a lucky punch and then sends him into a machine that creates portals to the entire multiverse. He's still alive. He may be recast, but that's a topic for another video. Now, I do think we need Kang to be a truly threatening villain before we see him in the Kang Dynasty. Right now, he's 0-1 against some ants. He needs to rack up a huge victory to make him seem like a real threat before the next movie. Remember, Kang is trying to conquer the multiverse to prevent its destruction.
I saw the multiverse, and it was dying, so I took control.
So let's just say the Universal Church of Truth stands in the way of that conquest. Maybe their actions will end the timeline, causing it to spiral out of control. Or, and this is a lot better, I think Kang would join forces with Warlock because he's actually playing a game of 3D chess to trick Adam Warlock into destroying himself.
How's he do that?
Alright, so let's say that Kang meets Warlock and they're fighting the Church and the Magus together. Now Warlock knows that time is running out. It's only a matter of time before he's pulled into another dimension, goes insane, and becomes the Magus. So Kang, a time traveler, tells him that he can actually send Adam into the time stream to end his own life, so he never turns evil. And then As Adam's doing that, we would get to see Kang face off against the Magus to show that he's so powerful that he can go toe-to-toe with the variant of Adam Warlock. And then Adam goes into his future, finds himself the moment before he turns evil, and he ends his own life. So then, all through the next movies, all through Avengers the Kang Dynasty, we're all going to be waiting for that moment when a past version of Warlock shows up to kill his future self. And that moment arrives at a point when Warlock is actually about to defeat Kang. So like, let's say Kang is trying to rewrite all of reality, conquer Earth, all that good stuff. And Adam's connection to another plane of existence, like Soul World, makes him the key to stopping Kang, or whatever the reason is. Adam Warlock is the only person who can defeat Kang at this moment. But the moment Adam defeats Kang is the moment he turns to the dark side. This is the moment when he uses his absolute power absolutely, and he becomes corrupt and turns into the Magus. Afterwards, he would use Kang's time travel technology to go into the past and form the Universal Church of Truth. So Kang has actually tricked Adam Warlock into traveling into the future to kill himself, because Warlock is the only character who's strong enough to kill Warlock. So after Warlock kills himself, Kang has no Magus to challenge him, and he can finish his conquest. And all because he used the time stream to manipulate his enemies. And then, of course, comes Secret Wars, with variants of all these heroes populating Battleworld, but that is for another video, where we think that Mantis is going to be key to saving the entire multiverse from Kang. What do you guys think of our Warlock theory? Do you want to see a Warlock solo film? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below or at me on Twitter. And if it's your first time here, please subscribe and smash that bell for alerts. For ScreenCrush, I'm Ryan Airy.